Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, May 28th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. California's budget in recent years has gone from surplus to deficit. This year, it's a deficit, and now the work begins to make cuts.
California has to have a balanced budget. It's required that it come up with whatever solutions are necessary to balance that budget, unlike the federal government, which can run a deficit.
Coming up, we speak with the legislative reporter to hear what that will take. But first, these news headlines. Hundreds of student athletes will travel to Clovis this weekend to compete in the state's track and field championships. But the event is now at the center of a brewing controversy over one athlete. As KVPR's Joshua Yeager reports, even President Trump is weighing in.
President Trump is threatening to withhold funding from California if a trans athlete competes this weekend. The participation by the single student athlete is renewing a push by conservatives to ban transgender people from women's sports nationwide. Diane Pierce is mayor pro tem of Clovis. She is echoing President Trump.
We're looking for the state of California to do the right thing so that our girls have a fair playing field in competition.
Jorge Reyes Salinas with Equality California says Trump's threat is about fear-mongering.
He's trying to target, or actually he is targeting, a child to score political points and make himself relevant.
But already, the California Interscholastic Federation says it is expanding eligibility so more, quote, biological female athletes can compete. For KVPR News, I'm Joshua Yeager.
The KVPR News team is saddened to report the death of one of our own. Radio host Marv Allen delivered the news and weather on KVPR airwaves for nearly 2 decades. He died last week after a battle with bone marrow cancer. Marv was known for his deep baritone voice and sense of humor. In addition to working with KVPR, he had a long career in commercial radio and production. Marv is survived by his wife, son, brother, and extended family. He was 80 years old. A Canadian firm is hoping to revive California's gold rush in Mariposa County. The company Blue Moon Metals recently got federal approval to open a precious metals mine in the Sierra Nevada foothills. The company will dig an exploration tunnel about 30 miles northeast of Merced in the coming weeks, according to CBS 47. Blue Moon Metals estimates there could be nearly 8 million tons of rock containing valuable minerals like gold and copper. The land was last mined back in the 1940s. Tuesday marked the start of the Scripps National Spelling Bee in Maryland. Caroline Van Garcy, an 8th grader from Clovis, did not make it past the preliminary rounds, but 3 other students from the San Joaquin Valley are still in the competition. Van Garcy was eliminated when she tried to spell the word fracas. Although she's not advancing, she and her parents tell KVPR they all intend to enjoy the rest of the week traveling through the nation's capital.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. California's state budget is in the red. In his latest budget revision, Governor Gavin Newsom announced the state is facing a $12 billion deficit. That's due to shrinking tax revenues, over-budget programs, and looming import tariffs from the Trump administration. As a result, Newsom is proposing budget cuts to lots of state programs, including many pet projects that Newsom touted as setting California apart from the rest of the country. The legislature must approve a budget by June 15th, so between now and then, there will be lots of backdoor negotiations in order to finalize the state's budget before the new fiscal year, which starts on July 1st. To help us sort out this budget seesaw, we spoke with Alexei Koseff from our California newsroom partner, CalMatters. He starts off by explaining that this financial problem California's in is actually not new.
Basically, over the past few years, all of the programs at the state has been expanding and growing to provide more services for Californians. The costs have outstripped tax revenue growth. And so we find ourselves in this position now where the state has to make some tough decisions between cutting those programs or finding another way to keep offering those services. In particular, Medi-Cal, which is the state healthcare program for low-income people, has really exceeded expectations about, how much it would cost to do a bunch of new things in the past few years, including providing insurance to people who are not in the country legally, providing expanded prescription drug services for things like Ozempic and other weight loss drugs, expanding the program to low-income seniors who were not eligible before. All of that has added up to billions and billions of dollars more than California projected for in its budget, and so now it finds itself in this crunch.
Yeah, I believe more people in the country without legal status signed up for Medi-Cal than expected. And then there was going to be some sort of change that Newsom proposed, right, of now charging folks who are already on the system $100 a month or something like that?
Right. So this was a big deal that California made this expansion of its healthcare program to people who are not in the country legally. This was something that Newsom said was very important to him in terms of California's values, that we take care of everybody and provide universal healthcare. But suddenly, just a year into that program, it's oversubscribed compared to expectations. The state doesn't quite have enough money to pay for it. And so now he's having to make this hard decision, and he's proposing some new restrictions, including freezing enrollment on people in that program after just 1 year. And then also in the next few years, adding a $100 monthly premium, like you might have to pay, if you have a private insurer, if you get health insurance through your job, which is not something that people on Medi-Cal typically have to pay. Mm-hmm. So he's trying to come up with ideas of how to stabilize the costs of this program and come up with some additional revenue to help pay for it in the long term. But this is causing a lot of backlash in the legislature and among advocacy groups that had helped push for this expansion in the first place. They're saying it wouldn't be fair. People can't afford these kinds of changes. And with the freeze, that it would end up leaving a lot of people off without insurance, basically, and betraying the values that Newsom had pledged to try and uphold in the first place, which is universal health care.
Yeah. Example of perhaps theory and reality converging and creating hard decisions. Now, obviously, Governor Newsom's been very critical of President Trump and outspoken about some of these tariff challenges. Could you speak to his stance on how the tariffs have impacted California's economy and budget?
Right. So that's another complicating factor beyond just all of the internal questions about whether California can pay for the things it wants to do. Now we've got all of this chaos and commotion that's happening externally that we have to try and figure out what effect that's going to have as well. And because of these tariffs that President Trump implemented earlier this year, which have already had an impact on the stock market and shipping, agricultural exports, like a lot of things that are very crucial to California's economy and its budget, the state's now projecting a decline in tax revenue next year that could also have an additional impact on, the health of the budget. I mean, one thing to really watch out for is the stock market. California gets a huge amount of its tax revenue from capital gains paid by the wealthiest taxpayers who are, involved in buying and selling stocks. So when the stock market goes down, so do capital gains, revenues for the state, and that means there's less money to pay for these programs. So the state is definitely keeping an eye on that. It's very worried about billions and billions of dollars less in revenue next year than they originally anticipated. And that could mean, even more cuts beyond what we're expecting if that's how it plays out.
Yeah, what other cuts could we potentially see? I know Governor Newsom released his proposed spending plan earlier this month. Those cuts are probably being fueled by this budget deficit issue, right?
Absolutely. California has to have a balanced budget. It's required that it come up with whatever solutions are necessary to balance that budget, unlike the federal government, which can run a deficit. So that means hard choices right now. And Newsom has proposed these cuts, the ones I mentioned earlier, really focused on Medi-Cal. That makes up the bulk of what he's proposing for solutions. But he has other ideas too. For example, in-home supportive services, which is a big program that provides home health aides to people with disabilities or elderly people, sort of capping overtime pay for those workers, which he expects could save billions of dollars. That's another potential cut that he's floated. And also kind of moving money out of like the cap and trade fund that California uses to pay for projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to pay for firefighting, for example, things like that. So it's not as clear as much what would get cut, but we know that things would lose out because there just would be less money in sort of some of those other pots of fund. So the ultimate solution is not going to come for a couple more weeks. It still needs to be negotiated with the legislature, and they have their own ideas, and they're going to push back and try and protect their priorities and come up with other ideas. So certainly some of these things all of these things are definitely on the table, but some of them might not end up becoming the actual final budget solution.
Okay, you mentioned legislators will now sort of review the governor's proposal. We know that Governor Newsom's been critical of Trump. How have Republicans responded to Newsom's plan and that criticism?
Well, I would say there is definitely a lot of "I told you so" coming from Republicans. Republican lawmakers had really objected to some of these moves that California made over the past few years to expand Medi-Cal, particularly the expansion of Medi-Cal to people who are living in the country illegally. And they said, this is just a cost that California cannot absorb. It's not fair. And the end result is going to be having to cut services to citizens in order to sustain this program for people who aren't citizens, right? And they really objected to that. And already for it to so quickly sort of be coming true in the way that they warned, they've really been kind of taking a victory lap about that. They have a pretty small minority in Sacramento, and so they are not really going to have a big say in the budget negotiation process. Ultimately, their votes aren't really going to matter. This is really going to be about the Democratic majority in Sacramento negotiating a deal with the governor. So we'll see how that works out. But certainly they've had loud voices out there saying, this is Newsom's problem. He created this mess. He's got to clean it up. And we warned him and he didn't listen to us.
Alexei Koseff, Capitol reporter for our news partner, CalMatters. Thanks for helping explain this proposal.
Thank you.
Legislators will now weigh in on Governor Newsom's budget proposal. They have until June 15th to agree on a balanced budget and get it to Newsom's desk for a signature. And as you heard in our newscast today, KVPR is mourning the loss of our longtime host, Marv Allen. If you were one of the many loyal listeners who enjoyed hearing Marv, we would love to hear what he meant to you. Visit our website to see how you can share your remembrance with us. You can also learn more about Marv's career. Just go to kvpr.org. And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.